Let's welcome my first guest to the programme. He's been coming on my radio shows for many years now. He really has. He's a man who's worn and wears, not just has worn, but wears many, many hats. He's a human rights activist. He's a terrific writer. He's a peace activist. He's been a decorated CIA analyst for many, many, many years. And as you've often heard on this programme, he's also briefed 5 presidents. He's a very distinguished man indeed. And I heard the other day, I was thinking, anyway, it was kind of about time that we got him back on our radio programme. But I saw a video of him talking about Julian Assange, something we will talk about today, where he talked about, where Ray talked about a recent subpoena served to him in Washington about the DNC email hack, and his assertion and Bill Binney's assertion that it was an inside job and not the work of Russian intelligence. I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated, if not horrified, by what's happening to Julian Assange. We'll talk about that as well. And I definitely would love to get his take on what's happening with the impeachment of Donald Trump. Let's welcome back to the programme an old friend of ours, Ray McGovern. Ray, thanks so much for coming back today. How are you?
You're most welcome, Richie. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great, sir. It's been about 9 or 10 months since we last spoke, and I missed you. I was thinking of you, actually. I went looking for you. I do stay in touch with the website raymcgovern.com, I do, and Consortium News. I thought it's about time we get Ray on, and then I saw the news of the subpoena. Now, this is huge news, by the way. Massive news. Just let me just remind very briefly before I get out of your way. Ray has been on this programme several times, and he introduced me, Ray did, to Bill Binney, another distinguished man who's come on this programme and made an absolutely compelling case that the theft of the emails wasn't done by Russian agents and was in fact an inside job. A compelling case you made for that, Ray. So the subpoena from a court, in a district court, I think in Washington, is fascinating. And I understand it's the very first time in your life and in your career that you've been subpoenaed. Is that right?
Yes, I've been unceremoniously thrown into jail and prison and things like that. I've never had the privilege of having a subpoena before.
Wow, Ray. What's it about? Why did they want to talk to you about this?
Well, it's a kind of a picayune sort of thing, Richie. It comes from Seth Rich's brother, a fellow named Aaron. Now, you ask, well, why? The answer is that he's suing everybody and his brother and sister, I think to intimidate people from mentioning Seth, because he and Seth are alleged to have been in contact with Julian Assange. And there are people who say that they gave they downloaded it onto a thumb drive, as Bill Binney would prove, and then they decided, well, they give that to Julian Assange, but they'd like some money for that. You know, I mean, like, hello, nothing's free in this world,
yeah.
So I think that, this is all speculation on my part, but they're going crazy. I don't know where they get the money, maybe from the Democratic National Committee. But they got all kinds of money. They're suing everybody and his brother, and not to appear down in a law office on the 23rd of December to show them what I have written about a leak rather than a hack from the Democratic National Committee. Well, hello, it's all out there. I don't hide anything or write anything in secret. So it's, I guess, kind of a warning that we have you in our sights, and if you say something untoward about me or my brother, I'm going to sue you. And you know how it is in this country. You can sue anybody, and people do. So it's not a big deal, but it is sort of intimidating that writing something that you have good sources for, or Kim.com is one of the sources of these. So is Cy Hirsch. And, there is the unresolved murder of Seth Rich. He worked at the Democratic National Committee. He was said to have been a very strong supporter of Bernie Sanders. And then when Bernie got cheated out of the nomination, and that's exactly what happened. And when the emails that were leaked to WikiLeaks showed that chapter and verse, well, it was just about that same time frame where Seth Rich was killed, 3 o'clock in the morning on a Washington, D.C. street. Now, another curious thing is that the person who succeeded Wasserman Schultz as the head of the DNC, I'll remember her name in a second, but she dedicated a book to Seth Rich. A book. The other thing is that the D.C. police were never allowed to investigate what really happened. It was said to have been a robbery, but curiously enough, they didn't take anything from Seth. They didn't take his watch or his wallet. So the whole thing is a big, big no-no to speculate about, because if you speculate that anyone, as we know actually happened, anyone with physical access to the DNC computers or server, that they gave those things to WikiLeaks, well, that destroys the whole canard about Russia.
About Russia.
Yeah.
I think the lady you're referring to, I could be wrong, I often am, might be Seema Nanda, it might be, the head of the DNC now. It could be, I might be wrong, Seema Nanda. That's coming to me, that name.
She's a black woman, and she was she took over, I'll remember it in a second, but she was very fond of Seth Rich, obviously. She wrote her memoir, and she was dedicated to him. So there's a lot of mystery out there, and the message we're being given is don't write about it. Don't talk about it. It's all a Russian hack. We know it's a Russian hack. Everybody says it's a Russian hack, so how could you say anything different? Well, you know us, Richie. We're going to say something different if we think it's true, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to handle this. People say you should sue him, Ray. You should sue him.
Counter sue, yeah.
So,
yeah.
I'm just going to maybe publicize it a little bit more, because it is pretty outrageous.
Well, of course it's outrageous. Your work on that case and the work of Bill Binney is well documented, and one of the things that's very admirable about people of your experience is your attention to detail when you write about these things, and, listing your sources. It's not a question of making unsubstantiated claims. It's a question of putting information in the public domain and clearly explaining why you reached the conclusion that you have. I was under the impression, maybe I'm wrong, but that Aaron Rich is desperate to get to the bottom of what happened to his brother. So this doesn't compute for me. What do we know about Aaron Rich, Ray?
Well, I don't know him from Adam or Aaron or anyone. But it seems to me that there's some reason why the Rich family is allergic to doing the modicum necessary to make sure that the FBI tells them what's in that computer. See, the FBI stole the computer as soon as it was given to them. Well, the D.C. police gave it to them. Cy Hirsch has been told what's on that computer. It's not very flattering to the Rich family, and it's not very flattering to anyone who wants to emphasize that it was, quote, the Russians that hacked into the DNC and gave the take to WikiLeaks. Now, I'm glad that you pay attention to the good work, the forensic work that Bill Binney and Ed Loomis, both of them former technical directors of the National Security Agency, believe it or not. Don't believe it. That's what they were.
They were.
Widely respected, and they had people working with them, a couple of people from Britain, and they ran all kinds of tests, and they looked at the metadata. In other words, they did the forensics that the FBI did not do. Now, you may remember that back in the 22nd of July, 2016, just before the election, the WikiLeaks released the DNC emails. Now, Were they damaging to Hillary Clinton? Well, for anyone who read them, yeah, sure they were. They show that she cheated Bernie Sanders out of the Democratic nomination.
Clearly.
Pure and simple.
Clearly.
Are they true? They were true.
Yeah, clearly.
So the big hue and cry to divert attention from that was to blame the Russians. And so the New York Times ran all the headlines. Why do the Russians do this? Why do the Russians? Why? It's McCain. It's an act of war. And nobody asked, well, it wasn't the Russians. It was a thumb drive, and we could prove that with the forensic investigations that we've done. And just to add a little codicil to this, just in the last week, Bill Binney tells me last night that forensic investigators, the ones that have worked with us, they're abroad, they've got more evidence that those Russian fingerprints, that were on some of these Guccifer 2 things, that they were inserted artificially by Guccifer or somebody associated with them, and they were later disappeared in the WikiLeaks release. So this is additional evidence that somebody's been fooling around with this, that Guccifer 2.0 is a hoax. We know that because we see other, not only anomalies, but other outright deceptions in what he released. And so the whole thing falls apart if you follow our forensic investigations. And what's different here, Richie, is that this is not the squishy sort of political analysis that I do. This is analysis based on the principles of physics, for God's sake, the principles of forensics. Physics? Yeah, Bill Binney has given me lots of physics lessons. It's very simple. It's fluid dynamics. You have a pipe, conceive the internet as a pipe, okay? And it has a certain capacity. And you can't get more stuff through that pipe quicker than the capacity, all right? Now, we know what the capacity of the internet was on the 5th of July, 2016. And we know that what was downloaded off these computers was copied from these computers at a rate 3 times the rate that the internet could handle.
Yeah.
But it happened to be exactly the same rate, the transfer rate, the copy rate, exactly the same rate that a thumb drive, a stick can handle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was not a big thing, but people don't want to listen to that. People are afraid that if they say that, their friends will laugh at them. Oh, what are you, pro-Trump? Are you pro-Trump? And what? So it's really, I've never seen it so bad here, and I've been around for a while, as you know, Richie.
You have. Yeah, you have. These are strange times. And this is very pertinent, of course, to Julian Assange, of course. Been speaking in recent weeks with various friends of his and people that have met him and know him. It's a desperate situation, Ray, isn't it? When you have a number of doctors in this country and psychiatrists in this country who've said that what they've seen of Julian, what they've, those who have met him, but then those who have observed photographs of him and the little video clips that there are, they say that his health is in a grave situation. You're very fond of him, of course. You've met him and you know him well. What do you say about that, Ray? It's looking very like it looks like the United Kingdom, the UK government, is really basically going to just fall over and do what your government wants it to do, and is going to facilitate the transfer of Julian to the United States of America. Or is there some hope still that might not happen? What do you think? Because it's obviously related to what we've been talking about.
Sure. Well, Richie, Julian is my good friend.
Yeah.
Just as a little sign of solidarity with him, I have not shaved since the 11th of April. So I have this big beard, and people ask me what it's about. And I say, well, when I pass a window or a mirror, I look and I remember Julian. And that's what I want to do. I want to be reminded. I don't want to ever forget what Julian has done and where he is now. So we Catholics would call that a sacramental of some kind, something that would remind you of something important. So Julian's been on my mind forever. Now, the most recent thoughts I've had, for what they're worth, is that he's in maximum danger right now. Now, I know that months ago, no one gave Labor half a chance to win the election.
Yeah.
What are the odds now, Richie? What are they saying today?
Well, about 10 or 12 days ago, it looked like Johnson had an unassailable lead. He was projected to win 366 seats, a huge majority. So you could say 13, 14 points ahead. It's come down to about 6 in the last few days. Yeah, it's really up for grabs, Bray, because they don't understand what the younger vote's going to do. They can't project that, you see. So there is still a possibility of a hung parliament. I wouldn't give Jeremy Corbyn a snowball's chance in hell of winning a majority, but he could win enough seats that would put him in a position maybe to form a coalition government. But I would say it's too close to call, Ray.
Well, the reason I ask, of course, is that Jeremy is pretty much the only hope that Julian has. It seemed months ago as though Jeremy had no chance at all for any share of power. Now it looks like, I guess, that he might gain a share of the power. And what would that do? What would it do to the U.S. and the jailers and the people who are torturing? And I use that word advisedly, torturing my friend Julian. What would it do? Well, I worry that the next 2 days are the maximum days of danger, because if it looks like Jeremy's going to win, they're going to kill him. They're going to kill him one way or another.
Jesus, that's strong stuff, Ray. That's strong stuff. That I know you wouldn't say that lightly. You've never been one to exaggerate or to be over the top. You really believe that if there's any establishment feeling that Corbyn might be able to form a government, you really believe that it's curtains for Julian?
Sure, the U.S. Embassy would just go to Whitehall or wherever and say, "Look, it's time to end his misery. Put him out of his misery." Now, I don't say that lightly, but I've had this incredible transformation. I grew up respecting British law. I grew up remembering the Magna Carta.
Yeah,
we learned all about that. Now, that was 1215, if memory serves, 802 years ago. Now, we used to think, well, wasn't that great that King John, that despot, that oligarch, he was faced down by the English people. Well, it wasn't the English people. It was the English nobles, okay? And so I find myself asking today, where the hell are the English nobles today? Is there no nobility left in the British system of jurisprudence? Apparently not. And Craig Murray, my good friend, the former ambassador to Uzbekistan from the UK, and John Pilger, another good friend, have seen Julian recently and are shocked at how emaciated and how cognitively disabled, at least for the nonce, he seems to be. So, I ask again, where are the British nobles? Where are the people who care about the rule of law in Britain?
Where's the journalists, Ray? You've been reading the UK press for your entire life. I do believe in my heart and soul that there was a time when the broadsheet press in this country, even the right-wing broadsheet press, would have been screaming bloody murder day in and day out, that Julian Assange has no business in a UK prison, but they are nowhere to be seen, the journalists. Nowhere.
Yeah. That's the real scandal. Freedom of the press. Well, your Edmund Burke got up in Parliament and said, I'm very proud of being part of these three estates. There were two Houses of Commons at the time, end of the 18th century. He says, but there's one estate that's more important than all of us three here, and that's just the estate up there. He pointed to the balcony. He said, those gentlemen from the press, those are the ones that keep our democracy because they keep us honest. The fourth estate. Okay, where is the fourth estate? Well, there's a fifth estate in the internet, and we're just sort of getting started. But I think we really have to do better than we've done so far. When Nils Melzer, now he's the UN rapporteur for torture, okay? He's a Swiss. And he was taken in by the same propaganda that 90% of the people on this globe were taken in. Julian Assange is a very nasty fellow. He doesn't flush the toilet, and he's mean to his cat, and all kinds of crazy stuff. They all believed it. Now, Nils Melzer says, well, hey, here I am. I'm the UN reporter for maybe I ought to go to, yeah, I think I'll go see Julian. Well, he goes to see Julian, and he talks to all of the people who really knew Julian and how he really conducted himself at that embassy. And he finds out, and he says explicitly in his op-ed that he was a victim of the propaganda that everybody else has heard until he investigated it and saw Julian. Now, why do I mention all that? Well, he wrote this beautiful op-ed 6 months ago. It was on the special occasion of Torture Day or something, and he could not get it published. He went to all the broadsheets and all the regular newspapers and magazines. No one, not one, would publish an op-ed from the UN rapporteur for torture on this big anniversary day. I forget exactly what it was. It had something to do with torture. So, he lists in his first paragraph all the newspapers that he went to, the Guardian, New York Times, Washington Post, all kinds of British newspapers. Nobody would publish it. So it's that bad. And if we lose the fourth estate, and it's almost lost now, then we're really in a position that, let me just tell you that I used to brief the CIA director by the name of Bill Casey around 11:30 when I came back from briefing the real seniors downtown, the president and his most immediate advisors with the president's daily brief. I know Casey, and I know who he was. And the very first thing he said at the very first cabinet meeting, Reagan made a big mistake in making him a cabinet member. The head of intelligence should not be a cabinet, but there he was at the cabinet meeting. And they went around the table and said, what's your objective for your tenure as Secretary of Health? And they came to Casey and they said, what's your objective? He says, well, we'll know, and this is a direct quote, we'll know that our disinformation campaign has been successful when the American people believe everything that we want them to believe, period, end quote. Now, here's an agency that is prohibited from domestic propaganda.
Yeah.
But he said it. Nobody winced. Al Haig was the Secretary of State. There were all kinds of people brought in there with Reagan. But the point is that I know somebody who was there. Her name is Barbara Honegger. She took notes and she gave those contemporaneous notes to the press. It's real. That's what Casey said. We'll know our disinformation campaign has been successful when the Americans believe everything that we want them to believe. Now, we know that the Germans the same way, the British apparently. There's a Ulfkette, a German.
Yeah, Udo, Udo Ulfkette. Yeah, very important that you bring him up, Ray.
Yeah, he works for the FAZ, the Frankfurter Allgemeine, and he spells it out. Curiously enough, no one would translate that into English. It was almost as though, if you translate that into English, you're going to be sued by Seth Rich's brother. It was really, so we've reached quite a pass. The good news, of course, is that there's us. And if you look around, you see so many people being active, and I mean this in support of Julian Assange as well, that I think this may be the wake-up call that we need. And I hope it is, because wait much longer, it's going to be too late.
It's going to be too late. Ray McGovern is our guest. Consortiumnews.com. Ray will have an article up there real soon relating to the FBI and the DNC emails. Interesting reading it and what you were saying about Lindsey Graham. You can read Ray on raymcgovern.com as well. Former CIA analyst. He's a peace activist, human rights activist, is Ray. And I wanted to ask you, Ray, one of the things I'll always remember is a few years ago, you did a program with me. I think we were on air for about 90 minutes. And it was the first real analysis of what happened in Ukraine. And it was brilliant. And all of those programs are all on iTunes. They're on Spotify now. People can listen back to them. And it was, I'm not just kissing your backside, Ray. It was amazing analysis of the Victoria Nuland orchestrated coup in Ukraine. It was brilliant stuff, and it was cutting edge at the time, and it was very important for this programme. And here we are today, we're hearing about, some sort of accord between Russia and Ukraine, some sort of ceasefire. But of course we have the impeachment proceedings against President Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on the impeachment? For our listeners who don't know, I suppose to briefly sum it up, it's a claim was made that in a phone call with the Ukrainian President, Donald Trump appeared to induce him to provide information, compromising information against Joe Biden, and that in return for that, aid that was promised to the Ukraine would be released. Trump denies it, says it's all madness, but it's gathering pace. It is, of course, related to everything we've been talking about today. How are you reading it, Ray, this whole impeachment thing?
Well, the two articles of impeachment have now been formulated and just published, and they'll be voting on them probably this week. The smart money says that Trump will be impeached before Christmas, and he should be, for God's sake. I hold no brief for Trump. My problem is that they should brief him for real reasons, like the fact that my 9 grandchildren won't have clean air to breathe or clean water to drink when they get to be my age. That's a real cause for impeachment, leaving the Paris Accord, or that he's condoned these wars with Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. He's violated the Constitution. He's taken gifts and emoluments and so. I mean, there are about 9 reasons they should impeach the guy. Why they picked this one? Well, it's very simple. The whistleblower, so to speak, who appears out of nowhere and says, hey, this telephone call where Trump threatened to withhold military aid to Ukraine unless the Ukrainians pursued dirt against Joe Biden and his son. I mean, Richie, it's beyond my comprehension. I mean, I don't know what Trump wants more dirt on Joe Biden. There's so much dirt.
There's enough out there anyway. Yeah, but you know what? Can I make an argument in favor of Trump? I suppose it's my job to do that. I don't have any truck with Trump either. But there are no good actors here, are there, Ray? I mean, Adam Schiff's performance is absolutely abysmal. Mischaracterizing the phone call. Even if I agree with you, and asking the president of another country to look into one of your political opponents, it's not good. In a fair world, it should bring down any politician. But none of these people on the other side of this, none of them are covering themselves in glory. None of them are anything other than dark actors. Schiff has got more skeletons in his closet maybe than Trump does. And maybe there's some truth to that. And maybe Trump's saying, well, look, it's election season. Why wouldn't you ask somebody, for any information that they might have? Maybe it's not as bad as his opponents make it out to be. I mean, you said yourself there are a million other things they could do him for.
Well, yeah. I mean, my bottom line is he should have been impeached 2 years ago. Get rid of the guy. The problem is you got Pence coming in after him. One would hope that Pence would be somewhat chastened by the experience of Trump having been impeached, but God knows, Trump is one of these, what do you call him? He believes in the rapture,
Right.
He believes that we have a war in the Middle East and he's going to be raptured up there and the rest of us will be left behind,
Evangelical. Yeah.
And the Secretary of State, what's his name? Mike Pompeo.
The CIA man, yeah.
Too. I tried to get a little word in with Mike Pompeo through a friend that knows him. I said, tell Mike Pompeo that there's a weight limit on the rapture. Okay. So maybe he'll realize he have to stay around for a little while longer and not cause a war right away. That's sort of a crazy joke, but these guys are crazy. And so what are you left with? Well, you're left with a fractured society, which, if this plays out as I think it will be even more divided going into the election next year than it is now. And that's saying something, because I think, was it 63 million people voted for Trump. Now it looks to them as though you're trying to get rid of the person they voted for. Again, I think Trump is the worst president we ever had. But if you're going to impeach him, why don't you do it in an honest way? And the reason they can't do that is because the Democrats are just as deep into what I call the Mickey mat.
Yeah.
The military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex. Mickey mat.
And a number of our listeners are tweeting, and they'll be glad that you said that, because a number of them have said on Twitter right now, as we're live, they've said, but it's difficult for the Dems to go after Trump for things that they are basically guilty of themselves presently and historically. And that's a very good point. And you've made that point there. Can I ask you, just to go back to Jeremy Corbyn, I would, of course, historically been an admirer of Jeremy Corbyn in the stance that he's taken, the anti-war stance and the human rights stance that he's taken throughout his career as a backbencher in Westminster. I'm really worried, Ray. You've got me worried in terms of what you said about Julian Assange and what might happen to him if it looks like Jeremy gets in. I'm worried that Corbyn has missed a big opportunity in the last 3 years. He's been the Labour Party leader for 3 years or thereabouts. And there was great joy, Ray, expressed in this country by people in working class community. I'm a working class lad, and I'm living in Salford now in Greater Manchester, which is a real working class, kind of former industrial heartland. Full of really good people. A lot of old Irish people here as well, or second generation, third generation Irish. And when he got in, they were delighted, Ray, because it's people like us that want justice in the Middle East, justice for Palestine. It's people like us, and I include you, that want to stop the Saudis trying to waste, destroy Yemen and kill hundreds of thousands of people. And Corbyn was a great advocate for these causes. But Ray, he's been very quiet on these things in the 3 years he's been the leader. And I think worse still, and I must point out his brother is a regular guest on this programme, Piers, the physicist. And I've said this to Piers, worse still, the spurious claims of anti-Semitism made against Jeremy Corbyn. He hasn't exactly rolled his sleeves up and fought them off, Ray. He's been very kind of acquiescent, if I can use, if there is such a word, to all of this. And my big concern is if Boris Johnson wins a majority or a small majority on Thursday, it will likely be the end of Jeremy Corbyn. And I might think to myself, Jesus, what a wasted opportunity in 3 years. He had plenty of time to go to bat for some of the things he used to go to bat for. And I don't think he's done it, Ray. What do you think?
Well, it's hard for me to judge on this side of the pond, but, I think we need to be open for miracles. So we need to be open for changes of heart. Who knows what will happen on Thursday? And I, too, am an admirer of Corbyn. I, too, are a little bit disenchanted at his quiet nature over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But give him a share of the power. I mean, certainly better than the alternatives, as I look at it. And I think if he does make it, and Julian stays alive for as long as is necessary for him for Jeremy to do the right thing, then that's the big hope that I harbor in my heart here. Because otherwise, they're going to give him up to the United States, and the U.S. will put him away forever without a fair trial. So, and the whole profession of journalism and authorship will suffer. So, a lot of things are at stake here. Julian is a really courageous guy. And when you have people like John Pilger going to visit him and saying, "Look, Julian, they're not going to do it to you. You're strong enough. You're gonna come through this okay." Well, that gives me hope that he will come through it okay. But the odds, of course, are against him right now.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for him. And I don't say that glibly. I mean that. And so does my audience. In the last couple of minutes before because I know you'll have a lot of interviews today and tomorrow and every other day. And, congrats to you for going to bat for Julian Assange all the time as you do through your articles and your media appearances. I wanted to ask you, It's actually gone right out of my mind now. It wasn't unrelated to what we were talking about. It's a question I've asked you before. I just want to make a point for I've got new listeners joining all the time here in the UK and also around Europe, and they'll be very impressed by you. They'll think, oh, I'm hearing this guy for the first time. You know, some of them will be. I mean, you're a very well-known man, but some people will hear you for the first time. They will think, Jesus, he's very impressive, Ray McGovern. I just want to make a point again. 5 presidents you briefed, CIA analyst, an honourable record. You work with people like Bill Binney, and again, thanks for introducing Bill to this programme, former technical director of the NSA. You guys have got a lot of experience. You should be in the Rolodexes. I'm very old-fashioned, me. You should be on speed dial. You should be on speed dial, Ray, for the UK's radio producers and television producers, because your voice is that, should be heard. When was the last time a Fox affiliate, whether it's a local station or CNN or C-SPAN or NBC or ABC News, when was the last time somebody picked up the phone to say, well, Ray, nobody's better placed than you to give us an opinion? When was the last time that happened?
I remember it well. It was the first week of September 2013.
Jesus Christ.
The reason I remember it well was the BBC. And I had been on BBC maybe every 4 or 5 months. And so I went to the very top of the CNN building in Washington. And they had a little booth there. And I was talking about Julian, I think. And then I came out and I opened the door too quickly and I knocked over this little guy there. And I looked, oh my God, that's Paul Wolfowitz.
Wow.
So I said, oh, I'm sorry. He said, well, yeah, what should you do? Where will you go? I looked out here and there was a sea of neocons there. They were watching the boob tube, the TV, okay? And across the hall there was Joe Lieberman. And they're all down in the mouth because Obama hadn't given them their war against Syria. You remember the story? They now strapped Obama with that false flag sarin attack outside of Damascus. And then everyone was on his back, including Kerry and all his advisors. Oh, you got to retaliate now. You said that there was a red line. You got to retaliate. Well, Putin bailed them out, as a matter of fact. Putin persuaded Assad to destroy all his nuclear weapons, all his chemical weapons. Okay, so why do I mention that? Well, these guys looked like they had like their mothers had all been run over by a Mack truck. They were down in the mouth. None of these flamboyant little ties, all black ties. I looked like a funeral parlor, for God's sake. Then Joe Lieberman and Paul Wolfowitz go off across the elevator shaft to this fancy thing, and they do their interview. And I'm watching it on the tube. And first thing Joe Lieberman says, and he was a senator for 24 years, he says, I don't understand Obama. He says there's a red line. There was a sarin attack. And he says he needs congressional approval to start a war. That isn't true. You don't need congressional. So I pull out of my back pocket my Constitution that Kucinich gave me, okay? I go to Article 1, Section 8, and of course it says right there, only the Congress can approve a war. Only Congress can declare war. So I underlined that part. I tore it out of my Constitution, and I went into where the elevator shaft was, where I knew that Lieberman and Wolfowitz would have to come out. So there they come. So I said, Joe, Paul, Ray McGovern. Now, you have to know the ethos in Washington to realize that you can't ever, if somebody looks important, and of course I was dressed to the gills, you can't ever say that you forget who they are. So here, I shake Wolfowitz's hand, and then he starts to have some doubts, and he starts to go. I said, Joe Lieberman, Joe, you've been a senator for how long? 24 years? Yeah, okay. Well, look, here's the Constitution. I pulled out Article 1, Section 8 for you. I can't believe that you think that the president can start a war without the congressional approval. So, and then Wolfowitz is going off, and I said, Paul, wait a second, and then by that time, Lieberman knows that I'm no friend.
Yeah.
He said, well, okay, I'll tell you this very well. And then what happens? The tall, beautiful, 6 foot tall, redheaded woman who's supposed to be escorting these two guys comes on the scene. She looks down and sees what's happening. She says, oh, gentlemen, I'm so sorry. I looked up at her. I said, well, I too am sorry. Where do you get these clowns on your show here? They don't know what the Constitution says,
Yeah,
that was my last appearance at CNN.
It was your last time.
Or the BBC. So I'm happy to be on Richie Allen. I think it's more fun, and hopefully it's informative to people who are open to new ideas.
Yeah, it certainly is, Ray. Thanks for coming back today. RayMcGovern.com, consortiumnews.com. You'll find a brand new article from Ray there shortly. All the best to your friend Julian Assange in the coming days and weeks. Thanks for doing what you do, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the new year. And sincere best of the season. Merry Christmas to you and yours, Ray, and thanks again for everything you do, my friend.
You're most welcome, Richie. Thanks for your program.
Not at all. All the best, Ray. The brilliant Ray McGovern live on the line from his home this afternoon. RayMcGovern.com. I know you're on there. You can find Ray on Twitter as well. And Consortium News is where you'll get the latest on this from Ray in the next hour or so. It might even be posted there now.